Kath, thank you. And conference, let me start by saying that Mike Amesbury was right when he said in the debate, it's been a hard year to be a Labour Party member. It's been a hard year for our party. It's been a hard year for anyone associated with politics. And it's been a hard year, most of all, in our communities as we've seen people lose their jobs. But the test of us as a party and as a country is, as it has always been, whether we can triumph over adversity. And a year ago, when we met, we faced an unprecedented economic crisis. You remember, lots of people said that recession would become depression and a repeat of the 1930s. Why didn't that happen, conference? One man, more than any other, realized the need to be bold. He realized that we couldn't just stand by. He realized we couldn't just opt for business as usual. He said we had to stand up for the homes, the jobs, and the hard-earned savings of the hard-working men and women of Britain. That man is Gordon Brown, our Labour Prime Minister, and we are proud of what he has done at home and abroad. Conference, we know there are tough times ahead on public spending. We know we're going to need to be more rigorous on priorities, on value for money and efficiency. But Gordon and Alistair weren't just right a year ago. They're right now too. They're right to say we have to keep spending until recovery is established. And the Tories were wrong a year ago. They're wrong now. And they'll be wrong at the coming general election when they say we should cut spending before recovery is underway. And conference, therefore, let's make no mistake. Let's make no mistake. Recovery is on the ballot at the coming general election. The Tory risk to recovery is on the ballot at the coming general election. But conference, our manifesto needs to be about so much more. Today I want to lay out what I think is part of our manifesto argument. In the coming week, colleagues will be laying out specific policy announcements, and on Thursday this will be brought together in a conference document. You know, when I think about the next 5 years in politics, I think that the crises that have made politics so difficult over the last year won't go away. The implications of the economic crisis, the political crisis caused by expenses, and the climate crisis too. And in those circumstances, business as usual just won't do. If we are to advance towards our vision of the good society, the greener, the fairer, the more prosperous, the more democratic Britain, boldness is the only option. Think about the economy of the future. It's got to be different from the economy of the past. What do I say to a kid in my constituency whose parents are struggling to make ends meet, when he sees people in the city walking off with millions of pounds, not having created wealth, but having destroyed it? That's not our vision of the fair society. That's why things have to change. That's why business as usual won't do. That's why we need to be bold. Bold in reforming the bonus system. Bold in ensuring that his parents see rising standards of living in the next Parliament through a rising minimum wage, and bold in reforming our financial institutions so they properly serve lower and middle income families in this country. And what do I say to him when he asks me what job is he going to do in the future? We know we've got to build an economy on more than financial services alone. That's why it's right, even in tough times, that we're investing in the low-carbon industries of the future, the digital industries of the future, because that will be the key to future prosperity. And conference, markets on their own won't do that. No company on their own would do that. That's the role of government, and we're the people that understand it. And what do I say to his parents, who say, yes, their job is the worry that they have at the moment, but there are other worries too. Family time, caring, safety on our streets. We need to show we stand for them. And being bold means understanding that prosperity is key, but there's so much more to life. And so we need in our next manifesto to ensure that we do more to enable parents to spend more time with their kids and to ensure that our parents have more dignity in elderly care. Anyone who's been through the nightmare that can characterize the care system knows that things have to change. They know that business as usual just won't do. That's why Andy Burnham was right 3 months ago to set out a range of choices, contributions from individuals and from government, to ensure that we can reform the care system. And that's why, conference, we pledge that we will complete that work by the time of our next manifesto, so that we can genuinely say that we will move from the unfair postcode lottery system to a universal national system of elderly care in this country. And if we have to be bold in economics, we have to be bold in our politics too. One of the most depressing things when you go on the doorstep is when people of 30 years old, 40 years old and 50 years old just say they're not interested in politics. A woman said this to me recently. She said, voting, she said, I don't do that. Conference, when we see that happening, we know business as usual just won't do. And of course, boldness starts with reform of MPs' expenses. But it has to mean a lot more than that. MPs more accountable to their constituents. It must also mean reforming our 19th century parliamentary institutions and making them 21st century institutions. And that means a mandate in the manifesto on House of Lords reform, democratic House of Lords reform. And we have to take on all the big issues that we face in our democracy. And we have to show that we will be the reformers. Boldness in economics, boldness in politics, and boldness on climate change too. I suppose I've learnt over the last year that climate change is no longer just an environmental issue. It's about the job your kid is going to do. It's about where you get your energy from. It's about the way we travel around. Business as usual says that on the environment, we wait for others to act before we act ourselves. Being bold means, as we have done, having a transition plan for Britain so that we show sector by sector how we can take carbon out of our economy and society and create a better life for people. Business as usual means letting the minority, and it is a minority conference, who say no to coal, no to nuclear, no to wind power. Being bold means that we reform our planning system, and we are the only party committed to reforming our planning system, because the Tories would never do it, and taking on the minority who would say no to low-carbon energy in this country. Business as usual means you can either have climate or fairness, but you can't have both. Being bold says we say to the energy companies, yes, there are upward pressures on energy prices, but we are not going to stand by as you rip off the poorest customers in this country, including those on prepayment meters. So boldness in economics, politics, on climate change, and in relation to the state too. Markets need our values, but so does the state. Conference. And let's be honest, as we look to the 21st century, the relationship between the individual and public services has to change. And it's because of the major steps forward we've made over the last decade that we can now offer to people something that you couldn't have dreamed of before, guarantees in our public services. The 18-week waiting list guarantee, the 2-hour cancer referral guarantee, the guarantee you can see your GP out of hours in the evening and weekends. And Ed Balls has shown how in education we can have guarantees of good schools. Sometimes, conference, that means things have to change. I've seen it in my constituency. A school that for 3 years was failing. Now it's under new management from a different school further north in Britain. The school, frankly, is transformed when you go into it. So let's have a manifesto that liberates the best in the public sector to do more, not less. So we need to be bold as we pursue a more prosperous, a fairer, a greener, a more democratic Britain. And what about our opponents, the Tories? Conference, the Tories would make a completely different set of choices about where to spend scarce resources. They oppose our new top rate of tax at £150,000. What's that about? They oppose our changes to tax allowances and pensions at the top. What's that about? I'll tell you what it's about, Conference. They want to stand up for a different set of people in this country, and that's why they would make the wrong choices in Britain. And what about those hard-won guarantees that I talked about in the public services? You know, the Tories have an alternative view about what we should do to our public services. One Tory council has even given it a name, the Ryanair model of public services. What is the Ryanair model of public services, Conference? Lots and lots of queuing and waiting, a basic service for the many, and the few get to pay their way. Conference, it may be an okay way to run an airline, but it's not the way you should run our hospitals, our schools, our care homes, or any of our public services. And what would happen to those guarantees under a Tory government? The 18-week late waiting list guarantee, gone under a Tory government. The 2-week cancer referral guarantee, gone under a Tory government. The guarantee you can see your GP at evening and weekends, gone under a Tory government. Conference, these are the choices we have to expose to the British people. And what would the Tories do? They would sell Middle Britain down the river just like they did the last time they were in power. They'd sell them down the river on health, on education, on tax credits and on Sure Start. I grew up in the 1980s. I know it's hard to remember sometimes, but we do need to remind people. Remember people dying on NHS waiting lists as they waited more than a year for an operation? Remember kids even in affluent areas being taught in leaking classrooms and porter cabins? Remember the divide between north and south and rich and poor? Remember what happened to our inner cities? Everyone in this hall knows we cannot go back. Millions of people across the country know we cannot but go back. Everyone in this hall and millions of people across this country know that was broken Britain, Conference, and we do not want to go back. So, Conference, don't let anyone tell you there aren't big choices at this coming general election. It's not about competing managers of the system, it's about competing visions of society. Remember David Cameron used to say, let sunshine win the day. Now what does he offer? Austerity Britain, pessimistic about Britain today, pessimistic about Britain in the future. We're the optimists in British politics today. We're the people who say that despite tough times, we can create a fairer, a greener, a more democratic Britain. So, Conference, as I've gone around the country, you've told me the manifesto you want. You don't want business as usual. You don't want safety first. You want boldness, and that is what we will deliver. And when we deliver, and in the coming months, Conference, let's go out and fight for the vision of society we believe in. Let's go out and fight against the alternative. Let's stand up and fight for the Britain we believe in. Thank you very much.